All right, it's day 12 of our online reading of Wonder, and if you've been following along with us, you know that Augie and Jack and the rest of Beecher Prep are away at a sleepaway camp for all the 5th graders. And what we just left off on yesterday is that Augie has made 3 new friends. He's made Amos, Miles, and Henry all stood up for Augie whenever those other 7th grade boys were kind of making fun of him. So they got in a big old fight, and the last thing we left off on was that Augie lost his hearing aids. Okay, so then now what we pick up on is him in his cabin, and this first part is him reading his book. Okay, so Sleep, page 273. Then they came out of the narrow valley, and at once she saw the reason. There stood Peter and Edmund and all the rest of Aslan's army fighting desperately against the crowd of horrible creatures whom she had seen last night. Only now in the daylight they looked even stranger and more evil and more deformed. I stopped there. I'd been reading for over an hour and sleep still didn't come. It was almost 2 a.m. Everyone else was asleep. I had my flashlight on under my sleeping bag, and maybe the light was why I couldn't sleep, but I was too afraid to turn it off. I was afraid of how dark it was outside the sleeping bag. When we got back to our section in front of the movie screen, no one had even noticed where we'd been. Mr. Tushman and Miss Robin and Summer and all the rest of the kids were just watching the movie. They had no clue how something bad had almost happened to me and Jack. It's so weird how that can be. How you can have a night that's the worst in your life, but to everybody else, it's just an ordinary night. Like on my calendar at home, I would mark this as being one of the most horrific days of my life. This and the day that Daisy died. But for the rest of the world, this was just an ordinary day. Or maybe it was even a good day. Maybe somebody won the lottery today. Amos, Miles, and Henry brought me and Jack over to where we'd been sitting before with Summer and Maya and Reed. And then they went and sat where they'd been sitting before with Savannah and their group. In a way, everything was exactly how we left it. Exactly how we left it before we went looking for the toilets. The sky was the same, the movie was the same, everyone's faces were the same. Mine was the same. But something was different. Something has changed. I could see Amos and Miles and Henry telling their group what had just happened. I knew they were talking about me because they kept looking over at me while they were talking. Even though the movie was still playing, people were whispering about it in the dark. News like that spreads fast. It was what everyone was talking about on the bus ride back to the cabins. All the girls, even girls I didn't even know very well, were asking me if I was okay. The boys were all talking about everybody getting revenge on the group of 7th grade jerks, trying to figure out what school they were from. I wasn't planning on telling the teachers about any of what had happened, but they found out anyway. Maybe it was the torn sweatshirt and the bloody elbow, or maybe it was just that teachers hear everything. They do. When we got back to the camp, Mr. Tushman took me to the first aid office, and while I was getting my elbow cleaned up and bandaged up by the camp nurse, Mr. Tushman and the camp director were in the next room, talking with Amos and Jack, Henry, and Miles, trying to get a description of the troublemakers. When he'd asked me about them a little later, I said I couldn't remember their faces at all, which wasn't true. It's their faces I keep seeing every time I closed my eyes to go to sleep. The look of total horror on the girl's face when she first saw me. The way that kid with the flashlight, Eddie, looked at me as if he talked to me like he hated me. Like a lamb to the slaughter. I remember Dad saying that ages ago, but tonight I finally got what it meant. Aftermath. Mom was waiting for me in the front of the school along with all the other parents when the bus arrived. Mr. Tushman told me on the bus ride home that they had called my parents to tell them that there had been a situation the night before, but that everyone was fine. He said the camp director and several of the other counselors were looking for the hearing aids in the morning while we all went swimming in the lake, but they couldn't find them anywhere. Borwood would reimburse us the cost of the hearing aids, he said. They felt bad about what happened. I wondered if Eddie had taken my hearing aids with him as some kind of souvenir. Something to remember the orc. Mom gave me a tight hug when I got off the bus, but she didn't slam me with questions like I thought she might. Her hug felt good, and I didn't shake it off like some of the other kids were doing with their parents. The bus driver started unloading our duffel bags, and I went to find mine while Mom talked to Mr. Tushman and Miss Rubin, who had walked over to her. As I rolled my bag towards her, a lot of kids who I don't usually say anything to were nodding hello or patting me on the back as I walked by. "Ready?" Mom said when she saw me. She took my duffel bag, and I didn't even try to hold on to it. I was fine with her carrying it. If she had wanted to carry me on her shoulders, I would have been fine with that too, to be truthful. As we started to walk away, Mr. Tushman gave me a quick, tight hug, but didn't say anything. that's where I'm going to stop. I don't want to tell you what happens next. All right, see you tomorrow.